Undertale has always had themes of prejudice within its story, especially given conflicts like the human and monster war, although I wouldn't consider it a theme that the game is trying to fully explore. One of the coolest aspects of Undertale Yellow is how it further explores these themes, and puts greater emphasis on the conflict between humans and monsters. Now then, before this video continues, I'll give a brief spoiler warning for Undertale Yellow, as this video will go over large portions of the Pacifist and Vengeance route, and some other stuff too. So if you haven't seen the game for yourself yet, I'd recommend playing it first before watching this video. Now then, it doesn't take an English major or a pretentious teenager on YouTube to tell you that Undertale Yellow's core ideas center around justice. Regardless, I think it's worth looking into this idea further. In the neutral ending, Flowey has some interesting dialogue about what the color yellow represents, saying this. And if we look at what the game itself has to say, it's clear that Flowey is right. Not just about the yellow soul, but what the game is about in general. Justice is defined as being impartial or fair, and as having moral righteousness, whereas judgment is the ability to discern a situation or people based on one's own beliefs. Justice, unlike judgment, embodies a character trait more than anything, and justice or justness is usually a part of judgment itself. Throughout the game, we see judgment through many different characters in a lot of ways, but I want to focus on how Undertale Yellow explores the prejudice between humans and monsters, primarily examining Clover's character, although I'll talk about some other relevant characters too. In the Pacifist route, Clover's arc revolves around their own judgment of monsters. They fall down because of what happened to the other humans, and once Clover does fall, they're told very early on that the king has been killing humans, and that the fallen humans are likely already dead. For sparing the monsters and wanting to see who they truly are though, Clover finds that these monsters are just people going through their own struggles with their own motivations for their actions, even if they aren't all completely innocent. Additionally, Clover also ends up finding out that the last human that fell down had ended up killing a decent number of monsters, showing how these humans weren't entirely innocent either. It's Clover's preconceived notions about the monsters and the fallen humans compared to what they actually are that defines Clover's primary conflict in this route. In the Pacifist route, Flowey can be viewed as somewhat of a personification of Clover's mission, constantly encouraging Clover in this regard. Flowey pretty much exclusively talks to Clover, and is often very dismissive of others due to how they could hinder Clover's true objective. This mission is something which pulls Clover away from other monsters. The flawed Pacifist ending shows what happens when Clover ends up trying to complete their mission. Not only do they ultimately die anyways, but they've also caused a rift in some of their relationships, as shown with Starlo. In the true Pacifist ending though, they ultimately put their friends and the other monsters over their initial mission. To continue discussing the Pacifist route though, I think it's time we discuss the most important character to this route that isn't Clover, that being Ceroba. Clover and Ceroba are designed to parallel each other in many ways with the Pacifist route. Both of their respective objectives focus on giving due justice to their kind. Clover wants to avenge the fallen humans, while Ceroba wants to fix her mistake with Kaneko and complete Chuji's work, which would ultimately help all of monsterkind. Clover and Ceroba both grow to respect each other throughout the game, along with the opposite kind to some extent. Both of them are also conflicted with themselves and their initial goals as well. Ceroba makes her conflict with her own goal pretty evident, but we could also see this in Clover, who, as previously mentioned, finds out about what the last human had done and how monster kind has been treated in general. In the end, they both give up their agendas in life too. Clover quite literally gives up their life to help monster kind, whereas Ceroba symbolically gives up her life by letting go of what she'd been striving to reach for a large portion of it. Looking at Ceroba's final fight too, the final boss memories we see within her fight are interesting, because after the memories occur she accuses Clover of getting in her head, and states after the final memory that they now know the truth. This implies that these memories aren't just something that the audience gets to see to learn about Ceroba's past, but that there's something that Clover is directly viewing and resurfacing. No explicit reason is given for this, but to me, it seems to be that Clover is specifically searching Ceroba's memories in order to properly judge her. The memories brought out don't paint Ceroba out to be purely good or bad. They examine the truth of Ceroba's character, both the unavoidable tragedies she experienced along with the misguided mistakes she made. And once Clover has seen the truth, as Ceroba puts it, Clover can judge her in whatever way they view as most just, without any prejudice on their part. Considering what the narrative has to say about either killing or sparing Ceroba, both are ultimately just by the game's standards. Starlo even points out that Clover was technically just in killing her. In the true Pacifist ending though, Clover eventually decides to give up their own soul in order to help monsterkind be free. Clover resolves to help these monsters after thinking of everything their journey had shown about them. It was through deciding to see the truth behind all of the monsters they met that Clover came to the conclusion that they wanted to help them be free. Clover won't be the one to break the barrier and set monsterkind free in the end though, that's for the original game, but their actions help to significantly close the division between humans and monsters, and helps them be able to earnestly view the other side. In the credits too, there's a flash forward to Undertale's final fight with Omega Flowey, which essentially functions as an encapsulation of what Clover does, helping those they perceive or judge to be in need. Ultimately, none of the monsters Clover faces, no matter how much they may have wronged Clover or how many mistakes they made, are truly villains or evil. They're all people that can reflect on their actions and can come to a conclusion on if their prior actions are really right or not. If Undertale Yellow were to have a true villain, it wouldn't be someone who has done bad actions but knows what they're doing is ultimately wrong like Ceroba. It would be someone that is unable to change their views and biases of the world. Someone who believes that what they're doing is almost always righteous, and believes that others are always at fault. Okay, I can't stall any longer. Let's discuss the Vengeance route now. In the Vengeance route, justice and judgment are still just as prevalent as they are in the Pacifist route, and it's frequently brought up, especially near the end. To be as blunt about Clover's character as possible, Clover at the Vengeance route is extremely bigoted. Just like in the Pacifist route, Clover's reasoning for falling into the underground is about avenging the 5 fallen humans. The only difference between the Pacifist and Vengeance route is that Clover decides to fully act on this mission for vengeance. And much like real-world bigots, Clover's biased reasoning will often lead to violent behavior to other groups. Let's look at the scene where Axis gets demolished, for example, where Clover powers up all the way from LV-12 to LV-19 after being told that Axis was forced to kill the previous human. LV in Undertale has always been an acronym for level of violence, or as Sans puts it in Undertale, one's capacity to hurt. Traditionally, EXP is needed to increase LV, but Undertale Yellow somewhat recontextualizes the mechanic, as Clover feels so violently towards Axis for neutralizing the fallen human that their LV increases all the way to 19 without any of the typical grinding required. That scene also highlights a key difference between Clover and someone else like Frisk or Kara, which is that Clover doesn't do these actions for power or their own sadistic nature. They do it out of a self-imposed obligation. The duel between Starlo is a good example of this. Clover doesn't disrupt this duel like Frisk does with Papyrus's puzzles, nor do they instantly attack Starlo as Starlo himself points out. They let the duel play out naturally, because it isn't about purely committing these acts out of their own sadistic nature, or anything like that. The killing of the Steamworks robots also shows this. They don't give Clover any more strength inherently, nor is it very pleasant to see them die. They're quite literally just robots after all. Yet despite that, they are necessary in order to complete the route. The likely reason why they're required is due to how Clover feels obligated to do this. The robots were made by monsters, and due to how Clover feels about them, they see it fit to destroy them all too. Getting back to Axis' death too, it's quite interesting how the reveal of the death of the fallen human parallels each other in the Pacifist and Vengeance route. In the Pacifist route, the reveal happens while Clover is actually trying to examine the truth of what happened, and so they end up learning far more beyond who ended up killing the human, but also that they weren't exactly innocent either. Another parallel that the Vengeance route has with the Pacifist route is in the final boss memory. While in the Pacifist route, Clover was searching for the complete truth of Ceroba's actions, as previously mentioned, Martlet directly accuses Clover of searching for a reason to hate her. This implies that this memory appeared for the express purpose of Clover further justifying their own prejudice of Martlet and monsters as a whole. The song for the second phase of Martlet's boss fight, Retribution, ties well into Clover's character in this route as well. The most notable thing about the song is its inclusion of the enemy retreating theme that plays when you only have a few encounters left in an area. You can listen to it here yourself. This motif fits well into this fight considering that even at 75% of her max HP, Martlet is already clearly struggling despite the bravado she puts on. At this point, despite how difficult Martlet's attacks may be, it's a one-sided battle that Clover is guaranteed to win. The term Retribution itself, the name of the song, is defined as being punishment inflicted on someone as vengeance for a wrong or criminal act. Considering everything Clover does in this route, it's quite a fitting word for them. Speaking of Martlet's boss fight, it's also important to discuss Martlet herself, who is by far the most important character on this route besides Clover. In the other routes, Martlet serves as a support and companion character, with her faith in humanity's capacity to not be evil being proven right to some extent or another. The Vengeance route is the route that fully tests Martlet's beliefs due to how irredeemable Clover is. In her flashback memory, we get to see how other monsters, like Chujin, were prejudiced against humanity in general. Despite the people she was surrounded with though, she still wanted to believe that humans weren't all evil like the people around her thought. In the Vengeance route, she's the only other character besides Flowey that actually learns Clover's name, in contrast to how all of the major characters on the Pacifist route learn Clover's name. Martlet's faith allows her to actually get to know Clover's name, and despite Clover's own prejudice, they actually give their name to her. Unlike other characters like Ceroba, Martlet doesn't view Clover in a purely negative light in this route. Martlet's first boss theme, Apprehension, captures her struggle pretty well. The word apprehension has a few meanings. The most evident meaning here is arrest, due to how Martlet is trying to apprehend Clover. Another meaning apprehension has though is doubt or uncertainty. Martlet gives Clover a few chances to turn things around and tries to assume the best of humans despite the circumstances, rationalizing Clover's violence as maybe being a part of their upbringing, and assuming other humans may still be sensible at first. This, along with many other examples, shows how she is somewhat hesitant to really condemn Clover, since as previously established, she holds a lot of belief in humanity, despite what they may have done to monsters and what other monsters think of humanity. Near the end of the game though, despite what Martlet would have liked to believe, her belief in humanity at large has been shattered, developing the same prejudice against humans every other monster has had from the start. This shift in belief is what gives her the conviction to truly fight against Clover, and ultimately be fighting for the same reason as Clover, to avenge her fallen kind. I've already talked about Retribution being Clover's theme, along with Martlet's first boss theme, so I think it's fair that I discuss the theme of Zenith Martlet's first phase, Remedy. This song has Martlet's motif in it, implying it's her theme, but additionally, I want to look at what Remedy actually means here. The word remedy has many definitions, but the most apt definition in this case is to set right an undesirable situation. Considering how Martlet wants to set right her perceived mistake of letting all of the monsters that Clover encountered die, this fits her character very well. The ending of the Vengeance route ends up paralleling the Pacifist ending in an interesting way. Before Clover kills Asgore, Asgore tells Clover that their violence has ensured this war between humans and monsters will never end. In stark contrast to the Pacifist route, where they help close the gap between the two races, Clover's prejudice of monsters has ensured that the conflict between humans and monsters is everlasting. As Asgore said, many more of both our kinds will perish. The message here is pretty clear. The prejudice felt by both sides is what drives the conflict between humans and monsters. This is a good life lesson in general, but many conflicts come from prejudice of some kind. We all have certain biases about other people, which often leads to actions motivated by our initial judgments of others. Rather than staying stubborn and making judgments and decisions based on those preconceived notions, we can resolve conflicts best by being mindful of other people's circumstances. The previous fallen human is an example of how this lesson failed. The details are still left decently vague, but from what we know, the human is implied to have ended up retaliating out of self-defense initially. And regardless of what the actual reasoning was for why they killed Insoden, other monsters like Chujin immediately assigned malice onto those actions. Both sides had prejudice towards the other, and thus, humans and monsters became more drifted apart. Clover can either repeat the same mistake as the last fallen human, or begin to break the cycle of prejudice plaguing humans and monsters, and bring them closer together depending on how they traverse the underground. Well, that's all for this video on Undertale Yellow. Massive thanks to a friend of mine, Tafduke, for gathering a lot of footage used in this video. They made the production for this video a lot lighter on my part and helped tremendously. If you have any other ideas on Undertale Yellow, then feel free to comment them down below. I love hearing other people's thoughts and opinions on media I enjoy. While you're down there too, feel free to like and subscribe if you want more content like this. I'm still very early into content creation, so every bit of support means a lot to me. If I make any more content in the future, I'll see you then. But until then, take care.